welcome back to My Brain is a Wonderland Season 2, a podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. I'm so glad you're here back with me, Emily, your host, talking about everything to do with being in your 30s, late diagnosed with ADHD and autism. Today, I am going to be talking about all the things I say wrong, quote unquote wrong, to people that I know. Trigger warning real quick. I'm going to be talking about taboo subjects just briefly, but things like true crime, murder, slavery, things that I might bring up with people when I'm not supposed to. So just a little trigger warning there if that might not be suitable for you. So what do I mean when I say saying the wrong thing? I think we've probably all been there. It's about saying something where you're saying it thinking, oh, I'd love to share this with everyone here. I know so much about this. I have so much insight and perspective on this. I've read so much about it. I'm passionate about it. And you say it, and you realize very quickly you shouldn't have said it. This usually for me happens in spaces where the person or people don't really know me that well, or places that are a little bit more formal. And you've guessed it, that place is work. This is where I mostly notice it, right? Because I feel like with my husband, with my direct family, even if I'm gonna say something strange to them, that seems strange to them, or not correct, something wrong, they know me. They've accepted me for who I am. My husband has married me. He loves me. By extension, his family does love me too. I know that, and they accept me. And so they know I might say these things that seem a little bit off kilter, and they're kind of used to it now. At work, it's different, right? At work, there is supposed to be, which I don't like, but kind of like, because I don't want to reveal my whole self, but apparently do constantly at work. There is a kind of barrier, a kind of veil that you are supposed to maintain, that when, for example, you're talking to your boss, maybe you don't tell them that you got really drunk on Friday night and vomited. Maybe you don't tell them that you're in an open relationship. Maybe you don't tell them that you adopted a child that is not of your race. There are certain things that you might feel are not safe to share, right? Maybe that you're gay is not safe to share with your manager, maybe, or your work colleagues. But what I find is that in certain, not even certain situations, it's just situations where I feel like, oh, we're just hanging out. Like we went to lunch with work. We are one-on-one chatting. That there are things that I feel like I can just say, and apparently you cannot. For example, at work, I realized very quickly that you have to be careful about who you swear around. So I don't swear on this podcast, I don't think, but I am an F-bomb dropper. I swear all the time in my daily conversation. I remember swearing in front of someone before at a job, and you could tell from their reaction they did not want to hear that. Also, talking about difficult subjects. I mentioned before taboo subjects, which I don't think anything is taboo, which might be a problem. I feel like I can discuss just the most awful things, and it's just being human, so we should be able to talk about it. But at work, that is not actually appropriate. And I'll give you some examples if you're wondering, because as someone with autism, sometimes I find it difficult to connect things without a concrete example, right? And I have to learn on the job, as it were. I have to learn, oh, I said that, that's not taken favorably. So I'm going to give you some examples of what I've said in the past at work and explain now why, I probably shouldn't bring that up. Or I can bring it up, but just need to be cognizant that it may make someone uncomfortable. It may be shocking to some people, and then you take those consequences, whatever those may be. If you have an accepting work experience, maybe they accept you and think you're quirky. Or maybe they're super not accepting and you get drawn up for HR. So let me give you some of my examples of things I have said. So this first one happened relatively recently, which is why it's just ever present in my mind. But I was at a lunch with maybe 12 to 15 people from my job, ranging from people at my level at work, and by level, I mean position, not anything douchey. You know, I'm an assistant manager, so there were other assistant managers, there were coordinators that are hierarchically below, there were managers, senior managers, and there was an AVP and a VP there. So AVP is this assistant vice president, VP is vice president. And they were at this lunch. And because there were so many people, you kind of split off, you know, you're talking to a little section around you. One of the AVP actually brought up the show. She couldn't remember the name of it. And it's called Who Are You? Or Who Do You Think You Are? Or something like that. And it's the show where they take celebrities and you go around with this guy, this historian. I forget his name as well. And they look into your history, your family history. So they might find out, you know, your great something in 18-something did something. They were this, they were that. And she brought it up saying, oh, I used to love that show. And I said, well, it's available on Hulu, and let me tell you about this episode I just saw, or had seen. And I said, there was an African-American man, actor, who was looking into his history, and everyone was looking at me, smiling super big, you know, I was going to say in bated breath, but let's not be dramatic about it. But they were looking at me, super excited about what I was going to say and interested. And I said, this African-American man found out that his ancestors were enslaved by Native Americans. It wasn't just the tone of the room or the vibe. Their faces literally dropped. Their toothy smiles became downtrodden Florence Pugh, you know, anti-smiles. And I immediately knew I shouldn't have mentioned slavery. And it, I think, made the white and Asian people there uncomfortable to hear me talk about slavery. Whereas to me, it was very, just what the facts were. You know, if you are a white American, that's the facts, dude. You know, slavery is in your history. And it was clear that they were looking for something fun and fluffy, and I brought up slavery, Native Americans. It just wasn't received well. So that's my first example, and I could tell from their faces and their visible reaction, but didn't think about it prior. The second thing was I was actually at an event for my work where I traveled, was in a hotel, and so you go out for dinner and blah, blah, blah. And I talked about this with my husband after looking after my nieces and nephews. Sorry, my sister-in-law, love you muchly, love your kids, but I had talked about this with my husband, and I was sitting at the dinner and we were talking about children, having children, engaging with children, blah, blah, blah. And I just said, aren't children boring, though? It's like, they're 5 years old and they're showing you a book that says the cat sat on the mat and you have to act like it's the most exciting thing, but isn't that boring? And I've never heard anyone talk about this. Usually it's that kids are difficult, they're enlightening, they're enjoyable, it's a nightmare, it's this, it's that. But no one ever says they're freaking boring. Like, you have to pretend that everything they do is so exciting. And I will say it was less of a reaction to the slavery thing over dinner, but I was like, okay, there's at least one person here with a child, maybe two, and you could tell it kind of died down the discussion. And it wasn't like anyone said, oh yeah, kids are boring. When no one responds to what you said, they have nothing to say, they don't know what to say, and they're trying to kill what you just said. Which is totally fine, I get it. Saying kids are boring, just randomly at a dinner. So that's my second one. The third one is kind of more generalized, because I used to do this constantly in my 20s, and I learned from people's reactions that I couldn't do it. I am a true crime fan, and it's something I've actually been looking into lately, into my motivations around it, and maybe I'll do an episode on it. But I literally used to, whenever anyone brought anything up, they could say, I was at a pond last week, and I could say, well, do you know there's something in the pond that could kill you? Someone could say, oh, I was eating oysters the other day, and I'm thinking about this because this was in the news. Oh, did you know raw oysters can kill you? And a guy just died from eating oysters. It's not that I'm trying to bring you down. It's that I have this information that I just want to share. And one of these things was, I used to be obsessed. Hyperfixation. Go back to the last episode, the first episode of season 2. Food for thought if you want to learn more about hyperfixation. But I used to have a hyperfixation on deaths at Disney. So there's I don't know if it's a rumor or it's been substantiated, but basically there's a thing where they say that anytime someone dies at Disney, they remove them from the property so that an EMT or a doctor can call their death, but not on Disney property. So that technically Disney can say no one's ever died there. But there's a website that documents all of the deaths that have happened at Disney. From the kid who was eaten by an alligator in Orlando, to people who've had a small tumor that has been shaken out during a roller coaster and killed them, people who've had strokes, heart attacks, what have you. And so I was at one point obsessed with this website and would read up on it all the time. And, you know, if someone said, oh, I just went to Disney World, Disneyland, whatever, last weekend, I would be like, oh, great, have you heard about the old lady who died in this horrific way? And I'm going to explain it to you. And it wasn't about the horrifying aspect. It was about that I was obsessed with it and just thought, oh, you'd love to hear this. It became very apparent in my 20s that almost nobody wanted to hear that. Almost nobody wanted to hear, oh, you went to Six Flags? Let me tell you about the murder, death, rape, but, you know, whatever. And this is something that I've realized in my 30s, is that I learn on the job, as it was. I learn by doing. I learn by saying the thing I'm not supposed to say and seeing the person's reaction to it, or people, and then go, okay, I can't say that in the future. Slavery, I probably never brought up slavery other than that time I told you about. In any other situation other than with people I know are familial and we're liberals and we talk about it in a way that's conducive and enlightening. And so that's the first time I'd done that. I do have a stopper now where if I'm listening to someone talk and my brain goes, oh, remember that murder? Like someone could say, oh, I was in a hotel in Nebraska. And I'd be like, murder in Nebraska? And I have a kind of stopper now where I say, yeah, don't say that. People don't want to hear about the murder, the kidnap, the rape you discovered about the place or the thing they love or the thing they just went to. And that's something I've really had to learn in my late 20s and 30s. And I've really had to kind of internalize that and realize that you cannot just say whatever you're thinking, really. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. I don't want people to be thinking about mass murderers and horrible things when we're just trying to have a conversation, even if it's something I'm obsessed with. And so I thought a lot about why I do that. And I think maybe there's a twofold reason, one connected to my ADHD, one connected to my autism. And I don't know if this is right, but I'm going to communicate it and talk about it anyway. But the first one would be impulsivity. And that comes from ADHD. There's a lot of feeling like you have an impulse to do this, to do that. A lot of people with ADHD overbuy things or do things that they wouldn't normally do because they have this impulsive need to do whatever they're doing. Just impulsive. You don't think about what you're doing. And so sometimes I think I'm just impulsive. I'm hearing someone say something and I'm just blurting out, I got to share this with you. This thing that no one would ever want to hear. It's murder, death, misery. Let's talk about it. And I have realized that it especially comes out when I'm drunk, right? Or if I've been drinking, the kind of barrier comes down a little bit and I feel even more impulsive. That's what happened with our kids boring. I'd had a couple of drinks and was all of a sudden like, kids are boring, right? And it was like, oh, no, maybe not. Let's talk about that. The other thing is connected to my autism. And if you're autistic or know anything about autism, you know that a lot of autistic people don't understand social norms. So this kind of idea that we understand that, oh, you shouldn't talk about a murderer, you shouldn't talk about slavery at work, is just not really understood because we just say whatever we're feeling. And I've definitely had that, and it's, like I said, described through this thing of I see how people react and then realize, oh, I can't say that. That's connected to my autism. This idea or experience that, oh, I said slavery, their faces completely dropped, and okay, don't say that. That's how I learn it. If no one tells me straight up, oh, by the way, don't bring up slavery at work, don't bring up a serial killer in town at work, I'm not going to learn that until I say it and I see their reaction. Which is frustrating, right? It's frustrating for me because I don't know until the time has passed. I don't know until I've said the thing I'm not supposed to say and now it's out there. That's the frustrating part for me, is I can learn not to do it again, but it's already happened, right? I've already in front of the AVP talked about slavery. I've already brought up in front of the senior manager the murderer that's stalking around, or, the person at Disney who was killing, but whatever. Just the awful things that I obsess about. It's frustrating that it takes seeing their reaction to learn. And it's nice that I can learn, but it's already happened. Ship has sailed. They're gonna know that of me and think that of me. And hopefully, like in the past, they think I'm quirky, eccentric, or a couple of words that have been used to describe me in the past. Beat to my own drum, march to the beat of my own drum, another phrase. But it's tough, And I'm trying to find this balance between being myself, my authentic self, and staying professional, which I really struggle with because I feel like I should only really share who I really am with people I can trust at work. which for me is people I've had one-on-ones with that I just feel like they're authentic and they're not trying to be, I don't know, they don't have a secondary, I can't think of the word, desire or whatever. But it's very difficult because you have to find those people you can trust. I've realized I have to not drink so much at work events. You know, we go to like lunches and dinners and they're like, get whatever drink you want. And then I'm tipsy and I'm talking about serial killers and whatever. I have to learn what's appropriate, which is good that I can learn from it, but it's really difficult to have to deal with. So I'm just trying to find that balance where I reveal who I really am, because I don't want to be not who I really am at work. But I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. Whether you're neurodivergent or not, I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. I don't want people to be upset. I don't want people to feel triggered. And of course, talking about violence and historical issues that are violent and scary might bring that up for people. So I'm really trying to walk that tightrope. And if you have any insight into this, anything that's worked for you other than keeping yourself a little shut down and only learning once you've done it and made the mistake, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Gmail, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube under My Brain is a Wonderland pod. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, I would love for you to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a great review. I really want to reach out to as many people as possible. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you for the next episode of My Brain is a Wonderland, Season 2. Bye-bye.